Welcome to my studio. I'm Susan Maddox, and I wanted to talk a little bit today about some of the new work that I'm showing, which is actually these portraits. So this is a series. There are 5 of these frame portraits. So these guys are about, 12 by 18, I think? Yeah, I think that's right. 12 by 15. Okay, I meant to check on that. So these are a series of portraits that I started a few years ago, and I had been doing a lot of portrait work before I moved to LA. And after a break of probably about 5 or 6 years, I had been doing my folded work for a long time, and I got the itch to do some portrait work. And I had been doing little watercolors, but I really wanted to try applying the way that I was painting my folded work to the portrait work. This is a very particular kind of technique, and I think this is a great example actually. So with something like this, and this one is called First Green, the inspiration or the source material for these was pretty much anything that was catching my eye. So it could be from a fashion magazine or an art photograph or something I found online. I have lots and lots of art books. Some of them are actually inspired by other paintings. And so I was basically just playing with whatever caught my eye and experimenting with using the technique that I use for my folded pieces. And the way that it worked is that the symmetry that we look for in like beauty, often when you put down the paint in this kind of technique, I would paint this beautiful painting, and then the paint itself would just start moving around. It would slide, it would all kind of go sideways, and a beautiful eye would turn into just a stain of color. A mouth would run. Things kind of move around, and it really sort of subverts that whole notion of like perfection and beauty. And I find that so interesting. It's kind of a maddening process, right? As you can imagine. Because you paint something and normally, that's what you get. But in this process, it completely changes. And I think it's a good question, like, why would you want to work like that? I've painted, for many, many years, 30 years, more. This process to be so interesting. Like, I just love the results. And I love them more than if I just set out to paint a painting and did that. I find this kind of painting to feel like a kind of co-creation. And it's kind of in the letting go of my expectations and the control over the situation where I find the most sort of, it's like a kind of magic or like a gift, And I just absolutely love that. And I love all the strange things that can happen with the paint when I work this way. And I just consider those to be such a wonder, how? How could it be that way? There's something about that I find incredibly satisfying, much more so than a much more direct approach. And that's just me. And I know that this kind of thing is not for everybody because there's a sort of philosophical belief underneath all of that values this kind of letting go. And yeah, that's not for everyone. Some people enjoy things that are very structured and very controlled, and that's great, It's just that I happen to enjoy the practice of this kind of work. So that's kind of the origin of the process for these. And I'll just kind of show each one. So this one's called First Green, and it's one of the first ones that I did. I honestly can't even remember what the source material was, but I always have loved the way that, in a way, I feel like the artifacting is almost like clouds moving across it, or, and it reminds me of those, like a pagan green man kind of a thing. That's just me. And this one that I called A Better, Happier Saint Sebastian, after the Frank O'Hara poem called, I think, Having a Coke with You. It's a beautiful poem, and he talks a lot about the colors, about color in that, like you wearing an orange shirt, and it's about love. And I think that the way that he was speaking about color and passion in that spoke to me. And I thought that this painting sort of resonated with those same ideas, finding beauty in the sort of unexpected. Now this one is an interesting one because this one really, you can really see how it walks the line between abstraction and representation. And this one does it so much. I mean, I know the source material and I read this one in a very particular way, but I've seen people who are not familiar with where it came from read it in a very different way. I've actually seen it displayed like this, and my son thought it was maybe a horse. And I think that that's absolutely fascinating. And I love that about this particular technique where, because of the way the paint sort of moves and functions, it really does walk that line between abstraction and representation in a very interesting way. I will, paint a figure and then it becomes something that is nearly unrecognizable, such as this one. So I know that this is painted from a photograph of a woman getting out of a bath and drying her hair. And this is actually from the book of photographs by Nozawa Nijima, who I am a little bit obsessed with. And that's my whole Obake painting series is based on those photographs. So this was kind of an early exploration of his work for me. And I would love to know what you see. Do you see a figure or something else? So that is sort of gets to the heart of that whole idea of letting go of the expectations, right? I see that I'm painting a figure of a woman drying her hair, but then in the process, it kind of has different ideas and takes that to another level. And this one is just so close to the edge, which makes it extra special to me. So this one is just called The Bath, I believe. And these are really beautifully framed. These paintings are all painted on just torn raw canvas. And I do that for a number of reasons. One of them is the preciousness. And in getting away from working on framed canvas, I found it very liberating to get away from the preciousness of the framed painting. And working, even though I'm doing very involved paintings, but working on the unframed, torn raw canvas keeps that freshness to me and helps me to keep away from the preciousness of the object. And one thing about these is that many of these do not work out. And it's definitely a matter of discernment. I mean, some of them get crazy in a way that I'm very into and very, very excited by. And some of them get crazy in a way that are just a mess. Like there's a hot mess and then there's just a mess. And there are many of those that just kind of go, and it's an additive process. You can't take away anything. You can't really paint over. You can only add more on top of it. So once things like kind of get to a certain point of I guess almost illegibility, I kind of have to just start on another scrap of canvas. and that's kind of, then I can do that. And I enjoy the fact that it doesn't feel like a huge commitment. And it makes it more fluid for me to work this way. So some of these paintings, as I mentioned, are actually inspired by other painters' work. So I really love Richard Diebenkorn's work. I think it's really fascinating, and I was looking at a lot of his portraits. He actually did a lot of figure drawing, even though he's not really known for that as much. But he has a piece called Woman with Yellow Hair, and so this is sort of loosely inspired by that. It doesn't really look like his piece at all, and it's not supposed to. It's not really an homage. It was just like a jumping off point, as all of the inspiration that I use is really. It has to be a jumping off point for whatever to happen, for whatever to happen. And the interesting thing about this is that sometimes I will paint the same subject numerous times. So, in fact, this piece is another version of that. And I think that the difference between these, it sort of highlights the process itself and the amount of intervention that the paint, the amount of sort of like control that the process itself has over the outcome. And I feel like I'm really just responding to what happens. Like, I make a mark, the paint does its thing, and then I respond to it. And it's a very interesting process to try to create something that has that balance of chaos and order, which is something that I really, really love, and I find very, very poetic, and I find that it has an entryway to me. It has an openness, I think, that I can really relate to. And I think the people who are attracted to this probably, whether they know it or not, are attracted to that sort of thing as well. So this is Woman with Yellow Hair 1 and 2. Thank you all so much for joining, and I'll be doing more of these, so I hope to see you again. Bye.